Well, welcome everyone to the Renaissance Ranch Addiction Recovery Treatment Center's webinar, quarterly family recovery webinar. And we are honored to kind of sponsor this webinar. This is something we do every 3 months at our treatment centers for those with addiction and their family members. And we've also invited our community to join with us all around the country. And we want to welcome you. We're going to have, we've had several people register from all over, and we're so grateful you're here. We are so thankful for technology that we have the opportunity to meet together in such a convenient way and talk about, particularly tonight, hear the voices of long-term recovery. You know, what does that mean? Recovering from addiction, character defects, weakness, codependency, recovering from, spiritual illness, emotional illness, mental illness, physical illnesses. And I brought this little puzzle here. I wanted to show you how many times have y'all put together a puzzle and you get the whole puzzle together and you're missing the final piece. You're missing one piece of the puzzle. It's so frustrating, right? And for our family 15 years ago, when we had 2 sons that were struggling with heroin addiction and opioid addiction, and actually multiple addictions, we didn't know what to do. We tried all kinds of things. And until we discovered what Alcoholics Anonymous discovered back in the 1930s, until we discovered the 12 steps of recovery, we really did not know how to help our family. We didn't have the roadmap, the recipe to know how to heal as individuals and also in our relationships. So several years ago, we had our sons get into treatment by the grace of God. And then one of our sons had a relapse and went to the Renaissance Ranch, and you'll be hearing from him tonight. But at that point, we were introduced as parents to the idea that, you know, recovery is not only for the person struggling with the chemical substance, but also for the family member who is struggling with codependency and issues that are invisible, you know. And so really, truly, for the whole family to heal, it takes the person, well, it takes all of us working on our personal addictions, as well as our codependent relationship, emotional, and mental struggles that we have with the chaos of addiction. So we are so grateful that you are all here. And we just pray if we help one person, it's worth it. I'd like to introduce my husband, Rick Dixon, and he will, let's start us out with the word of prayer tonight.
I think that would be appropriate.
Maybe ask one of our panelists.
Yes, Eric, would you mind unmuting and maybe offer us an opening prayer? Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Dear Heavenly Father, we're grateful tonight to be gathered here around the country and possibly the world via technology to participate in this Renaissance Ranch quarterly webinar. We are grateful that each of us had the willingness for whatever brought us here tonight to temporarily put our busy lives and sometimes chaotic lives on hold to learn about addiction, and more importantly, to learn about recovery, whether we're addicted ourselves and struggling, or whether we're a family member who loves our addicts, but are perhaps lost and frustrated. We're just grateful that as a group, we've been able to come together with the same intentions, and that's to heal. So please bless us, Heavenly Father, with healing, with hope, with courage and understanding that each of those that are presenting tonight, that if they have a special message that we're supposed to hear, that we can be alert and that we can be open to maybe some new ideas and some new ways of thinking. Bless those that are still trying to log in or trying to make the time tonight, that even if it's late, that they can attend at some point this evening. And most importantly, we ask that will bless us with a soft spirit and good feelings so that we can leave this meeting uplifted and maybe reinvigorated to win this battle. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Eric. Sure appreciate it. For those of you that just joined, my name's Rick. This is my wonderful wife, Christy, and we are recovering codependents. We really believe one of our greatest blessings has been addiction in our life, what it's taught us. It's just been a beautiful road. So excited to have our speakers. We'll introduce them, and one at a time. Please keep in mind that at the end, we will have question and answers. This will be a major part of this webinar. We have found that the question and answer section is very vulnerable. There's questions that come up that many people are thinking about, and we have different panelists that will be able to weigh in. And so don't just listen to this webinar and think, oh, that was great. We would challenge you to listen to the webinar and say, what are 2 or 3 questions that I want to get answered at the end? And then what you can do is go in the chat section below, just, you know, in a few words or sentences, share your question and to whom you want it to go to, or if you want it to the whole group. But again, make that a priority if you could, because these question and answers become a powerful part of the webinar. First off on the agenda, would like to introduce Matt Piper. I've known Matt for years and years. What's interesting is that Matt is a recovering addict. You'll note that every speaker we have is either a recovering addict or a family member that's been in recovery, working with and supporting an addict. You know, many times it takes an addict to heal an addict. We've heard that. Matt now is not only been in recovery for years from addiction, but he went through the Renaissance Ranch firsthand. And number 3, he has been so passionate about his recovery that he has now been working for the ranch for years and just received his certificate as a SUDC, which is a substance
Use disorder counselor.
Yeah, so there you go. And when I just think this is a wonderful thing that Matt has been able to do, and he works every day with the brothers in the ranch, but also teaches every Tuesday night the family class, one of the 6 family classes that we have. He's here to share his story, a little bit about recovery as it looks from his eyes, and just some things that will be helpful for those on the webinar. So
tonight. And just really quickly, we have a few people chatting in. When you attend a webinar, a Zoom webinar, it's a little bit different than a Zoom class in that you won't be seen or heard, but it's like you're just going to an auditorium to hear some speakers. So you will be able to listen, and then you'll be able to chat, like Rick said, with your question and answers. So thank you so much. Thanks, Matt. We're all just going to kind of check out for a minute while Matt takes center stage.
All right, thank you, everybody. That's okay. That happens a lot when I speak. People check out. So real quick is I'm going to set my timer because I've been known to talk for a long time, especially with something that I'm feeling passionate about. So, and again, thank Rick and Christy for that introduction. So my name is Matt. I'm a recovering alcoholic, a recovering addict, a recovering codependent, a recovering perfectionist. What I really suffer from is the disease of shame, in which there's no cure, but it can be put in remission based on me staying in my fit spiritual condition and the daily maintenance of my 12-step program. So just a real quick overview of myself. So I first got into recovery in 2003, thanks to the Davis County Justice System. It didn't really stick. I liked what was being taught in recovery, but just didn't really let it transfer from my head to my heart. And then continued, I had some sobriety, but continued to use either opiates and alcohol until April of 2013 when I entered the ranch program. And so, so it's been about 8.5 years now. And oftentimes people ask me, you know, what made the biggest difference for you? In fact, early on in recovery, our bishop asked my wife and I, you know, what made the difference in our relationship, because he had met with a lot of different people and relationships that would get divorced or split up over or less than what we had experienced. And we were able to share with him the basics of recovery, which is I worked on myself and my program, and Holly worked on herself and her program, and attended Al-Anon and family group meetings. And so the biggest takeaway, even for tonight, I was thinking, you know, what could I share with you guys? And there's an old saying that no souls are saved after the first 20 minutes. So I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. But if there was one thing I could share in just my short time that I get to speak with you guys tonight, is just to know that you're not alone. And that's the reason why we provide these family groups and these sessions and things like that. And I've got the great blessing of being able to work with your loved ones that are in the ranch, your husbands and your sons, but I also get the chance to work with families. And so the cool thing is with addicts and alcoholics and you as family members, both of you, it's important to know that you're not alone, because the disease of addiction is a disease of isolation. And that includes with the addict alcoholic and also the family members. There's a lot of shame around it and nobody wants to share about it or discuss it. And there's a saying in recovery that I love. It's called secrets die in the sunlight. And so we're able to bring this stuff to the surface. And the great thing with getting support in recovery and like these family groups and is to be able to share with another person and to be able to get those things off your chest and connect with another human being. And so it's often said that we're designed to deal with our emotions in concert with another human being. That includes addicts, alcoholics, and family members alike. And when I talk about the disease of isolation and addiction as that disease of isolation, we see the same law and the principle in nature, right? So if the disease of addiction was a wolf pack and the wolf pack attacks a herd of bison, it knows it can't bring the whole herd down, but what it tries to do is separate one bison from the herd so it has the power to bring it down. And that's how addiction survives in family systems. People don't talk about it, they don't discuss it, they don't share about it, and it just thrives in that condition. And so the hope with family group and meetings and things like that is you can kind of get out and being able to connect with other people as well and begin to heal from that and use the resources that we have, at the ranch and in Al-Anon. There's a lot of 12-step meetings that you can attend as well to lean into that and connect with somebody else. And I love about this, here's a quick brief history of Alcoholics Anonymous. So back in 1935, when Bill W. started AA, they basically borrowed the 12 steps a little bit from the Oxford group, a little bit from another group, and kind of brought them together. But what Bill W. said made AA different than any other program was one alcoholic sharing with another one. And so him and Dr. Bob were able to sit and validate each other's experience through empathy and compassion, and judgment and criticism for them went out the window, and they were able to connect with each other. Now that's the same with you guys as family members. You might be a wife, you might be a mom or a dad or a loved one suffering in silence and afraid to say something or to let anyone know that you've got some stuff going on. I encourage you to kind of break through that shame and the guilt that you might be feeling. And even for myself, I think back when my wife told me, so I had lost my job and basically lost my license. It was very, very bad. And she came home one day and told me that she had told the bishop what was going on. And I was so upset. And I'm like, why did you tell him? He's going to think that I have a problem. And Holly said, well, you do have a problem. And that's part of the problem is we won't acknowledge that we have a problem. And so family groups are a great way for you to connect with others. And again, the hope is that your loved one gets into some kind of treatment and gets some help. And that's what we want. But the hope is also that you can get some help for yourself and you can be okay regardless of what's happening around you or the chaos around you. Because again, that addiction is just a tornado of chaos. And if you can find some peace for yourself, and that's what family group will do for you, meetings and things like that, and connecting with other people in recovery as well. So just want to shed some light on that. And of course, if you have any questions or comments, please, share at the end. We'd love to be more than happy to answer your questions, and email me privately as well. I'd love to answer any questions you have. So thank you for letting me share and look forward to connecting with you guys. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Wonderful comments. The one thing that you said that grabbed me was in your marriage, it stayed together where others that were struggling didn't have a chance. Why was that? And you says because both engaged in recovery. And in the question and answers, maybe we can talk a little bit about that. Is because I'm sure there's marriages that are struggling because of addiction, and what can a couple do? What can the family member do, the spouse or those that are supporting him do? So we'll talk a little bit about that. Sure, appreciate that.
Thank you, Matt.
Matt, that was wonderful.
You're welcome.
Hey, you guys, I want to introduce our son Tyson. I remember when he got into treatment, and we're on the way home, and Ty, I don't know if you remember this, but we were on the way home from a meeting, or maybe from the trip. I can't remember, but it was right after you had come out of treatment, and you were passionate. It's like you seen the light and heard a voice type of thing. You had really engaged in recovery, and you says, Dad, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. I want to help others who've struggled with addiction. And I thought, boy, I hope that is truly what he's wanting. And you guys, after he said that, he never did turn back. Ty now is a substance abuse disorder counselor as well. He's a great leader. He opened the outpatient for the ranch and now is the CEO of the Renaissance Ranch. He's a major owner in the ranch and runs it. And truly, it takes an addict to heal an addict. And I'm very proud of what Ty has been able to do as the CEO and as a recovering addict with now 10, 11 plus years of recovery. Let's hear from him some of his feelings and thoughts and what's going through his mind. So Ty, you're on. Appreciate it, son.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate the kind words. I for sure would not be here today without the loving help of a power much greater than myself. And even at times when I didn't understand this higher power, and I didn't, and I wanted to deny there was something, and so I could stay sick. When I came to the ranch, I found out that I was wrong about everything that I had thought I knew about life. So if you can imagine, 15 years ago, I was a 20 or 19-year-old addict. I had played football in high school. I went to 3 different high schools. I got in a lot of trouble in high school and wanted to experiment with drugs and alcohol and everything like that. But about 9 months after I graduated, I was ended up in the Salt Lake County Jail for the 10th, 11th time. 120-pound addict coming off of drugs. I'm really grateful today for law enforcement, and because I had to be stopped. I wasn't going to stop. And was raised with good parents and in a good home, with a lot of opportunity. And thinking back to when I was in that jail cell, thinking back to it now, I was baffled at how my life had turned out this way, how I had ended up where I had ended up. It seemed like just a few years earlier, I'm at scout camp, the Eagle Scout, or I was passing the sacrament, or I was playing football, or I was being a kid, and I had acquired this deadly disease very, very rapidly, and luckily was able to be stopped and then get help. It's been certainly wasn't easy and has not been easy. But I'm very blessed and grateful to have been able to go to the ranch. What was going to other treatment facilities before, what was huge for me going to the ranch was, one of my biggest problems that I had, right? And one of the biggest needs we have as humans is a social support group and network. Our family's a part of that, our significant others a part of that, but we have needs as humans to have emotional and social support, So I had friends that I thought were my good, dear friends, but they were very unhealthy. And I knew that if I continued to be around these people, I was going to find myself back in a cell with with shackles, going to see the judge, and trying to not and live in that life. But luckily, when I went to the ranch, I learned, I became educated. And I also got to feel and experience many different men around me who genuinely wanted to change their lives and were making the steps to change their lives. And I learned how to be a friend. I learned, meaning like a friend is honest with you. They tell you straight up what they're seeing is harming you, and what could be parts about you that are not serving you. And that was the really first time I really started getting feedback from other men that had what I wanted, a sense of peace and stability and a purpose in their life. Men I was in treatment with, and other staff, and feeling that, and it really I really started to get it when I realized, when we have these alumni meetings every Wednesday, we have a AA meeting where all the brothers that had come through the ranch, they come back and they give back. And I saw that these guys were genuine about wanting to give back to me, be a part of my life and support me. And these are men that I regard as brothers and I love dearly, and I'm still very close with years later, and I know will be close with decades to come. And I think one of the greatest blessings of my life today is I get to be in this role that I'm in, after I've had a lot of experience in education and so forth. And I'm very fortunate to be in the position I'm at. And I'm just a part of the whole system that is the ranch. I'm just a piece of the puzzle. I'm just I'm a role. I have everyone. I'm just in this role, as owner, but as person that's ultimately responsible for our financial viability and the quality of what we do, and making sure everyone has their needs met, both employees and clients. But I'm no better or worse than anyone. And we all rely on each other heavily and lean upon each other heavily in our respective roles. And one of the coolest things about my role today is I get to ensure our culture is awesome, and that we have an engaging, healthy, positive culture. It's the thing that I'm the most proud of today is our band of brothers, is the literally hundreds of men that stay in contact with each other, that support each other, that show up for each other. Our meetings that we have, I mean, we've 100 people in these meetings. We pack that barn, and then we have a bunch of people on Zoom we do fun things together. We were able to go to Bear Lake a couple months ago and do a big book retreat. We're going to Lava Hot Springs the first part of November to do another big book retreat, and to go to the hot springs and to share life and to live life with each other, clean and sober, to network together and help each other become successful in whether it be our personal life with relationships, or things that we want to do with our lives, and careers that we want to engage in. And one of the most beautiful things is also seeing a lot of our employees that are in the band of brothers that have been through the ranch, like me, that care deeply about the ranch. So we're grateful that this is for us. This is so much more than a career or a job. It's truly a calling and a blessing. And rent is due every day for us. We're not cured. So, we still have to engage in our recovery on a daily basis. We've got to write We've got to read, we've got to meditate. We get to do these things. We get to talk to each other. We work the steps. We work with one another, and we're honest with one another about how we're feeling and what we're seeing. And we maintain an authentic connection with each other so that we can have a positive, healthy existence. And so like our emotional needs are met within that context so that we can show up and we can be the fathers that we're capable of being. We can be the sons that we need to be. We can be the husbands that we need to be, and so on and so forth. So I'm very grateful to be a part of this great cause and the dozens of staff members that work within the system of the ranch to make it special. I'm especially thankful to my mom and my dad for making things like this webinar happen, and so many more things surrounding what the family members are providing. I'm so grateful for the panelists on here, and Eric and Matt and Lane and Bri and I mean, I could go on and on, but these people who show up for the ranch and show up for their families and show up for me, and blessed to be a part of this thing that's so much greater than myself. And you know, I'm one of hundreds of living proof evidence that recovery is very real, and that God is very real, and that we don't have to do this on our own, and that there's a power available to us to do for us that which we cannot do for ourselves. And so with that, I'll close my sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyson. Awesome, son. I really appreciate that. I loved where you said two things. You says, I had to rely on a higher power. You started your comments with that, and then you ended it as well. You know, the other day we were doing a meeting, and there was a young man that had been in there for a couple of weeks, and he had some hope, and he says, I'm getting some hope. I've tried to lick this for many years and I've never been able to. I says, what's made the difference? And he says, the brotherhood. To see how many people have gained sobriety that were just like me, I can't believe what that's done for me. And it means so much. And he says, you know what? I'm learning to rely on a higher power, which I never knew how important that was. And so just thank you, Ty, for those comments. And maybe we can talk a little bit more about that a little bit later on. But let's move on. Want to introduce to you all Jeremy. Willie, Jeremy is an alumni, went through the ranch some time ago. This is what's interesting about Jeremy. Usually a person will start using when they're a kid, or in their teens, or maybe late teens. Jeremy got through all that stuff. He was unscathed, went on an LES mission, great job in the early years. He then took his first year, or his first drink, at age 40. And that's when things went south. He describes it as, it came to the brink of a divorce. That's when he got into the ranch. And what's neat now is that he and his wife, and you'll hear from his wife here in a bit, Sherry, they consider his addiction their greatest blessing. Think about that. So anyway, good to have you here, Jeremy. I want to turn the time over to you.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I'm going to use my stopwatch as well, so I don't take up too much time. My name is Jeremy, and I'm a very grateful recovering alcoholic and addict. My sobriety birth date is February 1st, 2017. So I've got 4 years and 7 months or so sober. And tonight, what I would like to do is share with you a little bit of my story some of my experience, strength, and hope. And maybe to help you understand a little more about this disease and the hope of recovery. Like Rick said, I grew up in a very loving home, very loving parents and sisters. We loved each other. We told each other we loved each other. We were affectionate with one another. But in my home, we never talked about anything real. When serious things would come up, we never talked about those things. It was very uncomfortable. It was very awkward. And my father, who I love dearly, he's a great man. His answer to everything was work. Well, you need to work more, go to the gym. And those are great things, but they're distractions. They don't really get down to the feelings and talking about what I was going through or how I felt. My mom, I feel I was a little closer to as far as being someone I could go and talk to about anything. But my mom was a person who built me up. And that sounds great. But she would build me up and say, oh, you know, you're a good looking kid. You've got a lot of friends. You're smart. You're talented. And at the time, I didn't realize this, but what I wanted my mom and my dad to do is just validate how I felt. And I wanted them to share with me a time in their life where they felt that way. I wanted to feel like they understood me and related to me. And I don't blame my parents. It was passed on. On my mom's side, I have 3 uncles who are alcoholics and addicts. My dad had a strange relationship with his mother. And so it's just passed on. And so, you know, when I was young, I would bury those things. And I liken it to having a backpack on and picking up a little pebble and putting a pebble in the backpack. And as I got older, more things would happen. I would stuff more feelings, avoid more things. But I wouldn't say I had a miserable childhood. It was pretty awesome. My high school years were pretty awesome. Played football, had a lot of friends, had a lot of connection. None of my friends drank or did drugs. I didn't. And the vast majority of my friends and I served an LDS mission. And it was one of the best things I've ever done in my life, was serve a mission. And I served in Guadalajara, Mexico. As I got home, about a year or 2 after I got home, I noticed a lot of insecurities, especially with dating. I was really afraid and intimidated of women, which is really strange because I grew up with 3 sisters. And as a kid, I was around my 2 aunts and my mom and my cousin quite a bit. And I started to notice a lot of self-pity, a lot of jealousy of friends, living vicariously through friends, feeling like I was stuck, feeling like I wasn't smart enough, I wasn't good looking enough, feeling like I didn't matter. And so in my 20s and my early 30s, I struggled. I'd go through these periods of anxiety and depression. And I'd go to a therapist, get on some medication, get back out and live life, and then taper off that medication. And I'd go a year or 2, maybe 3, and be fine, and it would come back. And when I went to these therapists, I mean, we never really dug deep, but I think at that time I was pretty guarded. I had a lot of walls up, and you know, I would just tell myself I probably have a chemical imbalance or something like that, or it's genetic. Fast forward to about the age of 35, 36, I had some back issues, and I was prescribed hydrocodone and muscle relaxers, and for quite some time I used them as prescribed. But then I slowly started to notice that, hey, they kind of take the edge off when I'm stressed out, or I'm feeling a little down today or a little anxious. It kind of helps with that. Or I just need to relax. Or, hey, I had a great day, let's celebrate. And as I continued to take that medication, it became more progressive. None of my friends were alcoholics or addicts. I had met a couple guys through work that kind of had connections, but it was very expensive and kind of hard to come by. And in the meantime, my wife and I had met in 2005, and we'd been dating, and there was a lot of fear on my part. My parents had gotten divorced when I was 18. Very bitter. To this day, my dad still has a huge resentment towards my mom. It's very uncomfortable, but that's their issue. And so I was terrified of marriage, but I didn't want to lose my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time. But I just didn't know how to do that. I was paralyzed with fear, and that caused her some anxiety and some doubts. After 7 years of dating, we finally got married, and things got a little better. But about a year and a half into our marriage, I had still been taking pills. She had gone out of town with her sister, and for some reason, this light bulb came on in my head and said, hey, the liquor store is only 3 blocks away. So I went there, and I'm already coming up with a story in my head to tell the people in there that, I'm just looking for a wine, a good cooking wine. Can you recommend a good cooking wine? And now in retrospect, it seems silly because everybody that's in there is buying alcohol. They don't care. But I look back on that now and I can see the shame in that. I didn't want other people that were okay with drinking and didn't care if you drank to know that I was drinking. And so that's when I started drinking and then using pills. And then I got into some other natural herbs. And I remember the first time I drank alcohol, it was amazing. It felt great. If you can imagine being trapped in a room, there's no windows, only a door, and you're locked in there, and somebody's got the music cranked up full blast, and it's the type of music you like the least. First time I introduced that alcohol, the volume went down. It almost turned off. Those voices in my head went away. Those insecurities, that self-pity, that self-hatred, the feelings of worthlessness, it all went away. And I felt like this is what normal is supposed to feel like, or that's what I thought. And it was a solution. It worked. And it continued to work for a little while until it didn't, because this disease is progressive. And as the disease progressed in me, I found myself engaging in behaviors that were very unhealthy, very negative. And I don't want to get too graphic, but I remember going to the liquor store, pouring a bottle into a cup and just chugging it. And sometimes I'd done that 3-4 days in a row, and my body would be so toxic, that would come back up into the cup. And I'd look at it and say, well, I'm not going to waste it. I spent good money on it, and I drink it back down. Now, normal people do not do that. People that can drink like ladies and gentlemen do not do that. But at the time I was so sick, it just made sense to me. Like, yeah, I'm not going to waste this. It's my medicine. So fast forward a little bit, I'm progressively getting worse. I'm lying to my wife. I'm manipulating. I'm spending a lot of money. I'm finding excuses to get out of family events or just step away for a while to get drugs or alcohol. And it's not going well. And I'm hurting myself and hurting my wife. Finally, I got a DUI and I totaled a car on the freeway. And thank God I didn't kill anybody. I went off the freeway and I hit a tree and the car was totaled. However, what I was using, they didn't test for. So the case was dismissed and I was scared for another 2 or 3 weeks. Then it was back at it. Like, I just need to control it better. I need to make better decisions. And that's how my mind worked in my addiction. Then I had tried AA, and I went into AA and I was just so intimidated. I didn't ask questions. I was still in a lot of denial about the seriousness of my problem. And I went to the LDS Church's ARP program. I went to Renaissance Ranch's IOP program in Farmington when they used to have it in Farmington. And half the time I was on something. And they asked me to leave and recommended me to a higher level of care, as they put it. I like to say they kicked me out because that's the language that works for me, because I needed that. Because it wasn't fair to the group. Then after that, I got another DUI, and this time I had been drinking alcohol, and I went to jail, Davis County Jail, and I was scared to death, and I was in the drunk tank for several hours, and about 2 a.m, they come and get me, and they take you and they kind of give you, a little medical exam, and they strip search you. And this strip search is very thorough, every nook and cranny. And it was one of the most humiliating, dehumanizing things that I've ever been through. And I was scared. And I've seen a lot of movies and watched a lot of TV. And so I'm just in my head about this. And I didn't think I was going to survive the night. And they put me in this jail cell at 2 a.m, and my cellmate was in the wrong bunk. So they wake him up and ask him to move. And I'm like, oh, it's okay. No big deal. And he goes, no, he's not supposed to be there. And then I have sleep apnea. And I was snoring all night, and he's waking up and cussing me out. And I'm like, I'm dead. Fortunately, that didn't happen. Next day, they open the doors, and I'm walking the pod, as they call it. And I notice there's a lot of people that are starting to separate. And I'm like, this is just like the movies. You've had the Hispanics over here, you have the white guys over here, you have the black guys over here. And it was terrifying to me. And these white guys kind of befriended me. And but let me back up one minute. Early in the morning, that same morning, the pod was quiet, the doors hadn't been opened, and I heard this deep, rich voice reciting poetry. It was beautiful. And when the doors opened, I knew who it was. It was this giant of a man, probably 6'9", 6'10", black man. He came up and introduced himself to me. And I don't know why, but I felt some peace. And as the day progressed, these white guys are telling me how they used to be in these white supremacist gangs. They're talking about drinking and drugging when they get out. And they can't handle being out in society anymore. They're too paranoid. They had become institutionalized. In that moment, I felt the tender mercy of God. That was my rock bottom. And so when I got out, I went into treatment, and all those things happened for a reason. going to AA first, ARP, IOP, all of those things had to happen for me. It doesn't happen overnight. And so I went through treatment, 8-month program, not easy. It's not easy at all. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of hard work because there's a price that has to be paid. Us alcoholics and addicts, we do a lot of damage to ourselves and a lot of damage to our loved ones. When we are in our addiction, we are literally insane and we do not think rationally. So you may ask yourself, why does my loved one do this, that, and the other thing? Can't they figure out the consequences? You're looking at it through relatively sane and rational eyes. And they don't behave sanely or rationally. And that's not to excuse their behaviors. But when you hate yourself, you're going to mistreat others. Today, I live a life of recovery. I'm sober. Getting sober, staying sober, and recovering from this disease is possible. It's amazing. It's beautiful. There's beauty in the process. But it takes work. And it's just, the cool thing is it's just a 1 day at a time program. And the program I work today is the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I practice the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I sponsor guys in Alcoholics Anonymous. I serve other alcoholics and addicts, and I try to be of service to people in general. And I try each day to just not be a jerk and practice these principles and these tools that I've learned in all of my affairs. And I just encourage those who are on, when it comes to the question and answering portion, please ask away. Don't be timid, don't be shy. Ask all the questions that you want. We love you, we're here to help you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you,
Wonderful,
Jeremy.
wonderful. You know, we're going to come back on the question and answers, Jeremy, but it's interesting when you talked about anxiety and depression in your 30s. No wonder they call addiction the feelings disease, is that we don't want to feel because of a lot of times stuff that's happened in the past and why that happens and how treatment helps root that out. We'll have to talk about that a little bit. So I really appreciate you talking about that. So
I'd like to introduce Jeremy's wife, Sherry. I'm super impressed with Sherry. Hi, Sherry. So many years ago, back in, I think, end of 2017, 2018, Sherry got involved in the family education groups. And many of you know that AA, which is, started creating miracles for alcoholics back in the 1930s, they created a program for men with addiction, but they found that their family members were really hurting and kind of stuck in a lot of negative emotion. And so they started a program called Al-Anon. Well, anyway, Sherry, she really decided to support her husband, Jeremy, and she started going to our family education groups, which are very similar to Al-Anon. In that, however, we do add working the steps. So we try to work a step as well. And it's crazy because AA discovered that the family members need the same exact 12 steps that the alcoholics needed. So I'm so excited that Sherry's here to support and also share her journey. And I love our webinar tonight that we're focusing on some of the key ingredients that help all of us in our long-term search for peace and serenity and recovery. So thank you so much, Sherry.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. So I'll just tell our experience from my point of view, because that's all I can do. Jeremy and I met after years of being in the Utah single scene. As he mentioned, we dated quite a long time. We got along great and really enjoyed being together, but had some issues because we weren't quite emotionally healthy. And so we struggled to make that decision and then finally got married after 7 years. About 18 months later, as he mentioned, when I was out of town, he, he mentioned that he had used pills and things like that. So there had been some hints of usage, but that's when the drinking started, about 18 months in. And so that chaos of addiction started at that point. And the result of the dishonesty and the unpredictable behavior, I reacted by tightening my grip on him, trying to control his behavior. I was extremely naive, and it took months before I figured out really what was happening, and that he was drinking and not believing the lies that were being told to me. I just didn't have a clue. And then I just knew that I was trying to constantly stop the bleeding from our bank account, trying to decipher the lies from the truth, playing detective, trying to figure out what he'd taken, where he'd taken it, and how he got it. Our relationship descended into a toxic mother-child relationship where both of us were miserable. I was angry much of the time, and insisting that this marriage wasn't what I signed up for. I remember saying that quite a bit. And I was just exasperated about what to do and feeling like I had no control over my life. So he didn't have a drinking problem. He had a life problem. It looks like a drinking problem, but his solution was drinking, to numb out and to use mind-altering drugs as well. So anytime I tried to talk to him about it, his response was, "I'm just a piece of crap," which felt very manipulative. And I would end up trying to comfort him, which felt so opposite. Like I felt like he's making my life miserable. He should be comforting me. And so it was just this terrible roller coaster that was difficult. The temptation to do things for him was often too great for me to resist. I thought he was incapable, especially when he was using, but I was wrong. He was capable. It was just easier for me to take over and handle things. He was actually very resourceful when it came to getting his medicine, whether it be alcohol or pills, or herbs. And all my treatment did was make him feel less than, inadequate, and insecure. So I wasn't helping at all. I felt like I had to watch over him and watch his every move. And when I didn't, then I regretted not being there and thought I could have made a difference had I been. I struggled with boundaries, and I felt like the only threat I could make was divorce, which I proved over and over I wasn't ready to make, to go through with that. Even though at this point being single again really appealed to me because there was so much less drama in my life. But I felt like I should stick with him until I could say I'd really given it my all. I had lost respect for him. I loved him, but I hated his behavior. I recall thinking, wow, he must be in so much pain to do this to me and to his family. And it just caused him so much pain. But I realized, like, what must he be going through to make him do this? He mentioned some of the rock bottom experiences. There were many. And we went through a couple of years there of hell, but then we found Renaissance Ranch. As he mentioned, he flunked out of outpatient and totaled 2 cars, getting 2 DUIs, finally checked into inpatient treatment. By this point, I was definitely ready for a break from him and the chaos that addiction had brought. I had felt trapped for so long. And so when he went in the ranch, I felt free. And I filled my calendar for the next 2 months of events and friends that I'd been missing out on because of all the craziness that I had been suffering with. And then I would visit Jeremy at the ranch on a weekly basis and start to see the progress he was making. I also attended a 2-day workshop there at the ranch with a couple of the counselors where I learned about the family system and all about codependency. And then I started attending the family support group with Matt and Holly Piper, learning all that I could about emotional health and recovery, which was just the same information that Jeremy was getting at the ranch. He was getting it about 10, 12 hours a day, and I was getting it 2 hours a week. So once he was done with his 60 days inpatient, somehow someone had convinced him to move into sober living, which I was all for. I wasn't ready for him to be home yet. His slow transition from inpatient to living back home was a vital key to his recovery and to mine. During this time, I sort of felt like second priority to recovery for him. He put recovery first. And if it ever bothered me, I would quickly remind myself, like, this is the way it has to be. He has to put recovery first. And I respected that his dedication to it. And for 3 to 4 months, he lived with his brothers in recovery. He went to work, passed our house on the way back to his outpatient program in the evening, but didn't stop. He would attend meetings daily, and then he would come home on the weekend on Saturday afternoon and stay till about 5 o'clock on Sunday, and then go back to his Sunday night meeting. This schedule was so important. It gave him the opportunity to have real life situations, conversations that and experiences that triggered us both, and then process them on Monday with counselors and other recovering addicts in a group setting. I can't stress enough how vital it was for us both to slowly transition his schedule from inpatient to sober living to outpatient evenings and to eventually moving back home. This invaluable experience helped him to learn to process hard things on his own, and for me to observe his changing behavior and rebuild trust between us. I was learning too. So, but like I said, he had a lot more resources than my 2 hours a week back then. My attending family group was also vital. Learning the same material he helped me to be less codependent and more emotionally healthy, I like to think. This time was key for both of us to strengthen and work on ourselves, then come back together as stronger individuals. So now, where we're at 4.5 years into this, we're part of an equally yoked partnership where we're both working on our emotional health. I'm thrilled to have a partner who's emotionally honest with himself and with me. Recovery has taught us so many things: discipline, compassion for others, how to deal with conflict, how to avoid resentments and forgiveness, basically how to live a life in a healthier way. It's made him a better version of himself, and it's made everything about our relationship better. Now I respect and adore him. I'm so grateful for addiction and for the changes that it motivated us to make. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't have gotten there. We wouldn't have had a reason to do that work. So I'm thankful for the 12 steps, which is just a practical application of the atonement of Jesus Christ, and everyone needs that. So I feel very lucky to have recovery in our lives, and thanks for letting me share.
Oh my goodness, Sherry, thank you so much. What a great journey. I've been so impressed. Sherry has been attending family groups for like 4 years every week. I don't think you've missed hardly any. It's amazing. And what you can see how when they're both working on their own recoveries, she's trying to recover from her codependent ways, and he's working on his recovery, how it's created a very strong emotional bond. and strengthen the marriage. And you see that you guys are a beautiful example of recovery and what it can do for a relationship. Thank you. Thank you so
you.
much
Thank
for
you, Sherry.
sharing.
That's great. Okay, would love to bring on our next individual, Eric Kendall. Eric, the first time I met him years ago, he came into a family class and he was emotionally, I could just feel it and sense that he was just hurting like we all are when we are struggling with an addict in our life. His loving addict was his wonderful wife, Haley. And Eric was there to help support and to learn what to do in this situation. He has been more than dedicated in his efforts in recovery. His wife has been in recovery now for years, doing well. Eric and Haley teach Tuesday night from a couple's perspective and does an incredible job. And we are just so appreciative of them. Let's hear from Eric, kind of his view and his feelings on what's helped in recovery and just a little bit of his story. Eric?
Sure. Thanks, guys. And my wife said she can't be here tonight. She's definitely the better half, especially when we're on camera. So I wish she were here, but she did text me and she reminded me that in November, she'll be 8 years sober. So this program works. It's definitely not easy. I like the chance that I don't know how many people are on the night that are struggling with addiction and how many are family members that are struggling with, how do I cope or how do I live my life, happily with an addict. So, I'm going to be speaking, hopefully to all of you guys, but primarily my influence, I hope, speaks very loud to those of you that are on tonight who have children or spouses or family members, maybe even friends, because that's my experience. So, quick, my story, it's great to see Tyson. I don't know if he's with us any longer or not, but, probably like many of you, something was wrong in my mind, in my heart. My marriage was not going well, though to the outside world, I was the best chameleon in the world. This is rewind 9 years. But by no means was I the type of guy that wanted anybody to know that anything was off in my life. I hid the fact that things weren't going well. And my wife kept her addiction completely under wraps and secretive, like many of our addicts do. I didn't know that there was addiction going in our marriage, or in our life, but I knew something was off. And I remember walking through a local university down here in Utah County, UVU. We were watching some of our daughters perform a dance recital. They were, super young at the time. And I'm walking through this main hallway at the school and I pick up the school newspaper, and on the front cover of this newspaper in big black letters, it says, "Are you depressed?" And I remember taking that newspaper home that night and laying in bed and reading it and thinking, yeah, like I'm depressed, but heaven forbid, I'm not going to tell anybody that. I'm completely different today. It's not that I don't get sad anymore, but when I say different, I think Matt and a couple others spoke to how addiction is just, before we become educated, many of you are probably feeling, yeah, I don't want anybody to know that I'm addicted, or I don't want anyone to know that my wife or my husband or my kids are addicted. That was me. I was embarrassed. I felt shame, and I did not want anyone to know. So when it came out, I'll save you all of those details. When it came out that my wife had an addiction, my initial reaction was, okay, good. Then all we have to do is fix this addiction, and I'm going to get back to this like relatively, perfect and very happy marriage. And I just figured, we'll go somewhere. And I met Rick and Christy the first night I went to family group. For many of you, this might be your first meeting. And I just assumed they were going to teach me, here's how we're going to fix your wife. Because I'm a codependent. That's a word you guys are going to hear a lot if you continue to come to these meetings. And we codependents, we kind of like to control things. I'm a business owner. I'm a father. I was a controlling husband. I probably still am a little bit. But I just figured, give me 12 steps. I'll follow them. I'm a doer. We're going to fix my wife. I'll be on my way. And I remember Rick saying, hey, if you're here tonight and you think you're here as a family member supporting a loved one, that we're going to teach you how to fix fix your loved one's addiction, raise your hand. And of course, my hand goes up and I quickly bring it down. And he kind of burst my bubble and said, well, we're not going to even really talk about your loved one's addiction. They're in the other room doing lots of hard work, but we're going to talk about how you've contributed to the chaos and the addiction. We're going to talk about some uncomfortable things, but you're going to look back on this night and you're going to look back on your wife's addiction or your loved one's addiction, and you'll be grateful for it. And I got to admit this to Tyson, maybe he'll watch the video later. I remember thinking, what a excuse. I was ignorant, guys, and I was judgmental and I didn't understand anything. And I remember thinking, you're a dad, a good dad who wants to justify why their son was using drugs. And I don't buy that. There's no way you can tell me I'm ever going to look back at my wife's addiction. It's been horrible. I'm angry. I'm sad. I'm depressed. How am I ever going to look back on this? Well, here we are almost 8 years later. And I promise, if you're a skeptic, that's okay. So was I, but it has changed my life. And not the addiction. The addiction was just the catalyst that got me to, it forced me. I didn't want to do it, but it forced me to learn things that I otherwise would not have been willing to learn, because life was just, it was just going the way it was always planned. I mean, I had my problems, but for the most part, they were easy. Addiction is not easy. I really want to speak to all of you who are in pain and you're suffering and you're frustrated and you're angry. It's all normal and you should feel that way. Don't feel badly because you've got these feelings. Rick and Christy also taught me there are no wrong feelings. They just are. Some days we have positive feelings, some days we have negative feelings, but before my recovery, and that's really what we worked on, was my recovery, not from drugs. I've never been addicted to drugs, but I needed to recover from my controlling ways, from my, I would shame people. I was glad to know when I learned, and I want you guys to know, if you're carrying around guilt, especially as parents, but even as spouses, that what could I have done better? I hear it every Tuesday night in our classes. If only I could go back and if I could do things differently, but you can't. We can't turn back the time. But what helped at least alleviate some burden from my shoulders was the idea that the same way Rick and Christy taught me night one, you cannot cure your wife. You can't fix her. Matter of fact, if you keep trying, you're going to go crazy and you're going to make her even more sick. So stop it. But the same way you didn't have the power you don't have the power to cure her. You guys that are watching tonight, you don't have the power to cause the addiction. And I really thought as I was learning these things at the beginning, maybe it was my fault. What I did learn is I can contribute to her addiction. And to answer a question for Shelly, I know we're not supposed to be answering questions right now, but what can you guys do that are here for the first time, that are family members? You can't cure it, but the same way you may have contributed to some of the dysfunction in your family unit, you can contribute to the recovery by working on yourself, letting go of control. And to finish up with Rick's question was, so what has been my experience since then? My wife's sober. She's doing awesome. Life is not perfect for her. Life is not perfect for me. But now that addiction's out of our life, at least daily, what the 12-step process has done for us, and I know it has done for so many of the family members that we get to interact with each Tuesday night, is it also makes you a better human being, a better parent. No matter how old your kids are, you can't turn back the clock, but you'll be a better grandparent. You'll be a better employee, a better employer. I'm so much less judgmental. I mean, I was really ignorant and judgmental. And I don't want to know what my life would have been like had I not learned these steps. They've changed me. They've made me a better father. They've made me more patient. Certainly, I don't have it all figured out. I learn something every single week. I come and I work my steps. And something I'm doing right now, I'll end with this. I challenge all of you, no matter where you are in this process. My drawer here is locked, but I don't need to prove it to you, to show it to you. I just started about 3 weeks ago. We challenged our family members that come to our Tuesday night group to keep a gratitude journal. And I've struggled with this for 8 years. I've heard it. I've learned it. I'm 3 weeks into almost every single day of just starting my morning as I come right here to my office where I still am tonight. And before I get into my emails and I get into all of the drama of a business, I write down, after reading a little excerpt from a book that I'm reading, I write down all the things that I'm grateful for from the last 24 hours. And it's changed the course of my day. Now you may say, well, this This is no big aha moment. It has been for me. And maybe you'll take something different from these classes, but just please, if you're struggling, if you're unhappy, if you're just wondering, what can I do? As a family member, the best thing you can do for your addict is to get out of the way, quit doing what you've been doing, and learn some new ideas, lean on the shoulder of so many other people that will cry with you, and they will call you and they will text you. You'll feel normal again, because you'll realize all of these things that you're hiding from your neighbors or from your ward or from your friends, if you're like me, you'll hide them. There's a lot of freedom in starting to share that reality, and you'll realize how many other people are like, yeah, me too. Let's work on this together. So I don't know if my 8 to 10 minutes is up. I want to get to the Q&A because it's really powerful. I don't know any of you guys. Well, I probably know some of you, but I feel a love even through the camera, because I know how hard what you're doing is. And please just keep coming back to these meetings. That's it.
Hey, thanks so much, Eric.
Thank you,
Powerful.
Eric.
I love when you said my life is so much better now than what it was before. And it's because of recovery, not the addiction, but the recovery, the relationship with your wife that we've talked about and what's happened there. It's just really, really neat. We'll talk a little bit more about that in recovery. I love when you talked about feelings. Feelings aren't good or bad. They just are. It's okay to be in the feelings and how you're feeling and to be validated. So beautiful. Eric, you've come so far, and we just love and appreciate you so much. Thank you.
And you all
Thanks,
can
guys.
see the passion and that comes to our family members when they're working their steps. And you can see why Eric is one of our awesome facilitators. And he and Haley teach from a spouse perspective. And those family groups are every Tuesday night, and they're free and they're open to any couples or individuals that like to join. So thank you so much, Eric.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I am very, very honored to introduce our next speaker. I'm trying to navigate the webinar, the technology part of it here as well. But I'm super excited to introduce you to our women's director, our women's facilitator on Thursdays at noon. And boy, when I met Deanna, she came to our family group years ago when we were doing the outpatient group for the ranch. And she was on fire with recovery, still is, hasn't stopped. And she's really, really just really grasped the principles of recovery and have just incorporated into her DNA. And she's such an inspiration to so many women, and especially in getting a sponsor and finding friends in recovery and not doing this alone. So I want to hear from Deanna. So I'm going to turn the time to her, and just so grateful to her tonight and being willing to share her story. Thank you so much, Deanna. Oh, whoops, got to have you unmute. Sorry about that.
Thank you so much, Christy. I appreciate that. And it's such an honor to be here with all of you this evening. And I always, well, first let me introduce myself. My name is Deanna, and today I opt in as a grateful Al-Anon. I can also say a grateful Renaissance Ranch family member. I'm a recovering codependent with all its associated colors and textures. And I notice there's been some questions in the chat about codependency. And as you come to classes, we learn a lot more about that. And also through my journey, I discovered that I'm a compulsive overeater. And how that came about is I remember one of the first meetings, they encouraged us to read the first 164 pages of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's this book right here. This is the text that our loved ones use. And we were taught to read it to have compassion and understanding for the alcoholic. And I love to talk about the family disease of alcoholism, because when I was reading this book, I went, wow, if I substitute the word food for alcohol, this is the way my brain is wired. And so I also work what I call sister program, Overeaters Anonymous, and the 12 steps, and have found a lot of healing and recovery through that. I consider myself recovered from compulsive overeating, but not cured. And I just have a daily reprieve. I have to work my recovery every single day. And so I just wanted to mention that if there's some of you that have a little bit of curiosity about that, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk to you a little bit more about that. But most importantly, I just want to let you know that I opt in as a daughter of God, a work in progress. And I'm just a person that's never going to rise above being a human being. And I'm really okay with that. I've learned to honor what God's given me. And this is what keeps me turning to him. So I'd like to skip ahead real quick, only have a few minutes. But I do, before going any further, want to just tell you how honored I am to participate on this panel of this beautiful recovery family. I know most of them, at least a little bit. And it's an honor for me when people call. I don't hesitate to recommend anybody to any of the classes at the ranch. The ranch really encourages participation in Al-Anon, which is the sister program to Alcoholics Anonymous. And but we also have some good recovery strength here at the ranch. And the question's been asked about if this is a religious program. It is not. It is a spiritual program. That's recovery in general, 12-step recovery. And as a matter of fact, I would just like to share with some of you, there's a chapter in that book that I told you about. It's to the agnostic or to the atheist. And it's really interesting because agnostic, if you break down that word, ag means without and gnostic is without knowledge. And it's really possible for us to have nooks and crannies of our lives that we don't recognize we're agnostic. For me, one of those areas was food. I never stopped going to church, praying, anything like that, but I had some major God issues because we've heard a little bit about control. And I was just I like to identify myself I was a little bit of a God bosser. And so anyway, anybody's welcome in the rooms, and where you're at is right where you're supposed to be. So I wouldn't let yourself get hung up on that. I always like to welcome newcomers. You're the most important people in these sacred rooms tonight. And my little bit of time I have left will probably be directed mostly to you. We do encourage newcomers, just keep coming back. We always say that, but I want to encourage you to never leave, just stay and your miracle will happen. If you're like me, it probably won't look anything like what you're anticipating. And believe it or not, you'll come to see that's a good thing, because my options are so limited, but my higher powers are limitless. So please don't stop coming before the miracle happens. And I remember at my first meeting, I started to feel something I had not felt in a long time, and that was hope. And I love the acronym for hope. It's hearing other people's experience. So regardless of what happens with our loved ones, we can continue working our own recovery. What about if our loved ones aren't even in recovery? That's okay. This is great sacred time that we can set other things aside and work our own recovery. We can learn about the disease of alcoholism. We can learn the things that we can do that are helpful and the things that aren't. We can learn how to speak the language of recovery. And there was another question, I believe, earlier in the chat that I'd just like to share, that, there's only really two things we need to know about a higher power when we come in. And one is that there is one, and the other one is that it's not me. That's all we need to know to start out. Just those two things. I'd like to just tell you a little bit that something that's really been helpful to me as a family member is recognizing that alcoholism is a family disease. And if you pick up the Al-Anon literature, and I feel totally comfortable saying it's the purpose with Renaissance Ranch too. This is a recovery book, Pathways to Recovery. It's what you would use if you have a sponsor in Al-Anon. And it says in there that Al-Anon has one purpose, and that's to help families of alcoholics. And I would just like to point out, don't get hung up on the word alcoholic if that's not your loved one's drug of choice or behavior of choice. We can substitute the word people, places, things, situations, all nouns and pronouns and institutions in place of alcohol. And so if you look at step one, for an example, I come into the rooms because I have a problem. The problem is I have no power. How do I know that? Because my life's unmanageable and I have no power over alcohol or people or places or things or situations or institutions. And if you think institutions, think about all the issues there are right now about perhaps around religious experiences or politics and things like that. And so we learn to set all that aside in these sacred rooms and focus on the family disease of alcohol. And if your family's like ours, it impacts every family member in a distinct way. The 3 ways that we help our families, the 3 ways that we help families of alcoholics is first by working our own 12 steps. The second one is by having compassion and understanding for the alcoholic. And I need to tell you that that is not intuitive. We have to learn new ways of dealing with our family relationships. We have to learn those things that we're doing. So for those of you that are new, famous 3 C's, Eric already alluded to, I didn't cause it, can't cure it, can't control it, but I can certainly look at my contribution. And I really like that because it gives me something to do. I'm powerless over people, places, things, and situations, but I'm not helpless. I'm not helpless, and I can work my own steps, and I can look at my contribution, and I can see how I can be of help to my loved one. Even if they're not in recovery, I can go ahead and start that myself, start to be part of the solution. And one of the traditions in Al-Anon says that it's a program of attraction, not promotion. And so we can start working our own recovery so we can attract. I only have just a short time left. And I would just like to mention to you how important sponsorship is. I would encourage you all to reach out. All a sponsor is a step guide, and it's somebody just a little bit farther along that can walk us through the steps. It's somebody we can reach out to when we're in trouble. Hey, boundaries are new to me, or this is going on. Do you have any suggestions? And as sponsors, we're not therapists. We're just somebody that's working recovery. And I always like to say, I'm not a Renaissance Ranch employee. I'm just another bozo on the bus, is how people say. I like to say I'm another spiritually developing person on the bus. I'm just another family member that's walked this and that has seen this huge miracle and transformation in my personal life and through extension to my family. And so there is one reason that we sponsor, and I want to hurry and turn to the big book really quick and just read you to take us out, to take me out here. I just want to read you the first couple of lines in the chapter of working with others. This is why we sponsor. And I might mention that sponsorship is not for everybody. If you're a control freak sometimes, which I am, Deanna controlitarian, I like to call myself. Sometimes it's just another venue to practice our control. So we got to be really careful about that. But this is why we work with others. Practical experience shows us that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking, and from us, from codependency. Again, you can insert the word that fits you, as working with another alcoholic. So for me, there's nothing that ensures my immunity. And man, with the pandemic, we know about the word immunity, and that insurance of my recovery is I keep my recovery by giving it away. It's really beautiful. And it says, this is our 12th step suggestion. Carry this message to other compulsive overeaters or other codependents or whatever, alcoholics. You can help when no one else can. And so I'm grateful to be here tonight because this is part of my 12th step commitment. I'd happy to answer any questions. If anybody has questions about sponsorship, I'm happy to tell you about how I got a sponsor and recommend some venues where, you might be able to find that. And so I'm really excited to hear the other speaker and get on to Q&A. So with that, I will pass. Thank you very much.
Wow, Deanna, thank you so much. You guys can see why when Deanna, for many, many years, I felt in my heart that she would have a big role to help women someday. And I'm so grateful. And it's really cool that you mentioned the big book, Deanna. It's been a while since I've mentioned that. But those of you who are trying to understand what your loved one is really going through from the inside out, 2 recommendations. The first 164 pages of the AA Big Book. So powerful. One of the most powerful books I've ever read to understand what my sons were really going through. And the second one is one of our alumni, Jason Coombs, wrote a book called
Unhooked.
Unhooked. It's on Amazon. It's awesome. But to really get inside of our loved ones and really understand what they're going through, it softened our hearts. It helped our relationship. We came to understand this is a disease, and it's taken away their will. And the science and the medicine, ratifies that. It's so true. Deanna, thank you so much. I was taking notes as fast as I could.
Yes, and remember,
So, thank
everyone,
you.
Deanna teaches a Thursday
Thursday at
class
noon.
at noon,
Yeah.
and she's powerful, and it's a safe
And
place
so
for
are the
women.
women that attend. Those
Mhm.
women are strong. They're strong and they're
Mhm.
working on themselves. And there's so much growth and potential. And you feel so good and so proactive when you're working and you feel yourself growing.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Okay, our next speaker, Chris Nilsson. Chris, and I mean, we go way back with Chris and Heidi. These are wonderful people. And wrap your head around this. From the outside, like many families, they look great, but let me tell you some things that they've struggled with that has refined them through the refiner's fire. They've had a son that's gone through addiction, that's in recovery right now. He went through the ranch. They also have a child that's a special needs child. They also have a son that has same-sex attraction. They've had to deal with all these things, and it's been very powerful in knowing them and how they have been able to deal with this. They, as a couple, teach Tuesday night as well from a parent perspective. And boy, they are incredible. So without further ado, let's turn the time first over to Chris.
Great. Thank you, Rick and Christy. We love these two and they're amazing. Just wanted to introduce myself. And I like to do it like we've been at an AA meeting, so all of you can say back to me, hi, I'm Chris. All of you would say, hey, Chris.
Hi, Chris.
I'm a recovering codependent, a specialist in nonverbal shaming. I'm excellent at enabling and pretty well dabble really well in denial. All of those things I'm recovering from and working really hard on my own recovery, which I did not understand. Like Deanna mentioned, I hope that all the new folks won't give up on this because I was about to. As our son, I'm going to speak from a perspective of a father of a son who's in recovery from alcohol and certain drugs of choice. But I'm also I take a lot of my context from being raised by a father who was an alcoholic my whole life. A wonderful man. I need to make that clear. My father was a great human being, but oh, how I've been thinking back, and I don't have a lot of regrets in life, but I do regret that my family did not know about recovery early on in the days. I would have had better days. I would have had less stressful afternoons, evenings, times with my father. My mother would have had better opportunities, and we all as his children could have been a help to him. So Heidi will talk a little bit about hers, but we had totally different perspective when our son was using, and I was able to. I can spot alcoholic behaviors from a mile away, mostly because I'm an alcoholic. I don't drink, but I think, and my behaviors, and just as Deanna said, you can replace that alcohol with people, places, and things. Just as my son or my father would go to soothe themselves, to escape and to numb, I would use work. And I didn't know that before I went through family recovery and could identify what I was running from and how I was fearing things and how I would cope. So my testimony to everyone this evening would be is that we all have familial things that we've been taught generationally. We all have things that we might have been taught religiously that has become very freeing to me as I've worked on my own recovery. And I didn't get that. I got to tell you, our son, I was so happy that he had sought recovery at Renaissance Ranch. And the next thing we get is a letter from this incredibly bubbly person, Christy Dixon, telling us that we should spend some more time and energy towards our own recovery with our son. And I was resentful. I already thought there'd been enough chaos caused in our family that I didn't want to invest one more minute or time or what I thought was going to be precious lost time towards that choice that my son had made, and kind of a lot of resentment from the years of, with my dad when I wished he had been healthier at times. But luckily, Heidi, drug me out to 90th South, and we sat in these meetings, and I met soulmates in Rick Dixon and Deanna's husband, Will, who were further along the path in recovery that I could latch onto, and their wonderful spouses that I could see healing in their families, and that I could see the example. Tyson spoke about being around others and seeing that they could recover. I was seeing families that were recovering, but it didn't come quickly for me. I was a lot like Eric was, where I was just calling BS on sitting out there the first few weeks. I was like, can't believe I'm taking an hour to drive out here. I'm taking 2.5 more hours of meeting and then an hour back, and I was just resentful. But I was encouraged by Deanna to not quit until the miracle happened. What I thought she was meaning was that a miracle was going to happen by our son becoming sober. What I didn't know is she's referring to the miracle that was going to happen within me, that was going to contribute to a lot of relief to my son, who was already working on his recovery. I hope you make that connection. I thought I was there to help Sam, and like Eric mentioned, I'm a control freak, business owner. I get paid to make things happen the way that they should happen. I feel a patriarchal responsibility of a family, that I should cause certain things to happen and that should and shouldn't occur. I just basically a control freak. And I was very, very codependent. Here came this word of codependency. Can you believe that I lived with an alcoholic father my whole life until he passed when I was 46 years old? 46 years of my life, I didn't know what codependency was. Didn't know that. I thought when my dad wasn't doing well, I couldn't be doing well, because that's not good. And that's familially learned and entrenched in my being. And I exhibited that with my own kids. When they weren't doing well, I couldn't be doing well. Religiously, I was taught a great myth. And I'm here to dispel this for anybody who's signed up to this, that you're only as happy as your least happy child. Forget that one. Throw it out. Please throw that out the window. False doctrine, false teachings, everything. You absolutely have the right to be happy. You need to be happy. Your loved ones are going to need you to be divinely dependent rather than codependent. You're going to have to establish yourselves. If your greatest chance at helping your loved one is not to focus on them, it is to focus on yourself. Trust me as one that's been working now in this program for 4+ years, and our son has 3+ years of sobriety. The only chance he ever had for his sobriety was for his old man to get off his back and to quit the shaming and to quit the enabling and to quit the super unhealthy behaviors. But that didn't come from me working our son's 12-step program. It came from me finally getting through my thick skull that I had to work my own program and that I had to work on myself. And I just want to thank the group that meets with us on Tuesday nights, because I am a super work in progress, and I can regress so quickly if I'm not kept with a strong group working their recovery. As Tyson mentioned about being around those other alcoholics, as Deanna mentioned about being around other codependents, there's nothing like a codependent and communicating with another codependent to heal a codependent. In the same way, for an enabler with an enabler, for the same way, all the unhealthy behaviors, we exhibit them as parents. It's noble, it's charitable, we think it is, and it's a great disguise for charity in the things that we're doing. But if there's one statistic for the newbies out there, the newcomers, that really resonated with my mind, your loved one has an 85% greater chance of achieving and maintaining long-term sobriety if you work on your own recovery, not their recovery, on your own recovery. I like those odds. That is huge. I'm just so grateful. It's been mentioned tonight that I'm actually grateful for our son's addiction and for God's guiding hand in how I won't take the time today, but it was miraculous how we able to locate, show up, get our son in the Renaissance Ranch, get my fat, thick head over there and be able to move on. So I just want to I just really, really want to encourage all of you to do what Deanna and Will had encouraged me as a new person in the meetings. Don't give up until the miracle happens. Keep coming till the miracle happens. Just chance it. As a good friend of mine who has long-term sobriety now of 36 plus years from heroin, he always promises to refund the misery. I mean, trust me on this. It's a guarantee and a warranty you'll get from Chris and Heidi tonight, that if you'll try it and if you'll work on it, and if not, we totally promise to refund your self-loathing and misery that you were missing so badly at attendance. So, I really just want to express my admiration for everyone who's on this call tonight. There's other things you could be doing tonight. You're here because you love someone. I hope you're here also because you love yourself, and that you will take the time for self-care. We talk about on Tuesday nights, this is the one time we're always I'm talking from a parent perspective, we're always doing for the kids. You need to be able to have your oxygen mask on to help the child next to you. That's the truth that the airline speaks about. You need to be divinely dependent. That one opposite of the spectrum is codependency. 180 degrees from there is divine dependency. Whatever your higher power is, become divinely dependent on them, and you will see miracles happen in yourself. And one of the great byproducts is you may or may not, but it'll be an 85% greater chance that you will see that change in your loved one that you're so worried about. And you'll have a happy life. You deserve to have a happy life and not be dependent upon how they're doing. So blessings and thanks to Christy and Rick and Tyson and everybody on this panel. We love you, and especially our Tuesday night group. It's just wonderful to be with all of you. So
Thanks, Chris. So appreciate it.
Thank you.
Boy, that was awesome. You know, when you said the false doctrine, the myth that you're only as happy as your least happy child, see, that's codependency. If my least happy child is happy, I'm happy. If they're not happy, then I'm not happy. Same thing with the spouse as we're looking at them. And recovery from codependency is when our loved one, our addict, is doing well, we're doing well, but when they're not doing well, we're still okay. We're still happy, and we deserve that. I love what you said about that. Thank you so much.
I'm so excited to introduce Heidi, who I love so much. One thing I love the best about Heidi is she's very genuine. She speaks from her heart, and she doesn't filter too much. She lets you know how it is. And wow, what a powerhouse for a mom. I'm so proud of our family educators, and the Nilsons are amazing, as you can see. But Heidi, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you, Christy. And Rick, I'm really excited to be here tonight, and I always will be the oddball out and ask the question that no one else will ask, or say the thing that no one else will say. And so, of course, tonight my whatever little speech or testimony or whatever you want to call it, it will be different. I'm going to do it as maybe a journal entry, or maybe a letter to my son, or a letter to myself, but it's something that I wrote earlier today. As usual, Chris will spontaneously speak from the heart. I learned so much from him, and many of you know that his stories and his analogies are the best. He lives his recovery and studies while driving between jobs. He loves the work of recovery as much as I do. I, on the other hand, need books and study time as if I were in school. I have an amazing, beautiful sponsor who somehow reads my mind and reads my soul. And above all, I like to be prepared and read from a script. Through all this, I have found that it does not matter how you study and speak recovery, because when it becomes a part of you, it is always from the heart. We have heard so much strength and experience tonight on addiction. Valuable information you can't find in a book or on TV. This is real life experience that has taken place tonight. As I relate my experience to you, I hope this does not sound like it is all about me, but at the end of the day, I was the one, who needed changing. Many of you know my story. I was raised by good parents in a loving atmosphere and environment with no addiction. My problem was not one of need my problem was not one of need or sickness. It was not one of abuse or addiction. My problem was fear of God, fear of the one person, I should trust and have faith in. I spent almost 50 years in fear and suppressing pain and emotion because I could get through this life by being tough, and I did not need a God to see me through. What changed me? What changed me? A son's addiction. I did not understand addiction and many times asked my son, why can you not quit? And it is a known fact today that Sam's recovery only came when I told him I knew that he could not quit and that it was an illness. I now know it is a sickness of the brain, and without help, our son, our family, and especially me would never get better. I had to go back to step 1. My life is unmanageable. Then step 2, there is a God and it's not me. Then step 3, let go and let God. And then ending with my favorite step, step 12. After having a spiritual awakening, then share with others. I had that spiritual awakening. I found a higher power. Do I go back to my old ways? Absolutely. They are called slips and relapses. Do I set boundaries and then not stay on my side of the street? You betcha. Some days, do I fear God again and believe my family is doomed? Here and there, but not as much. And do I find meaning and purpose in a son's addiction without a doubt? I have often said to our son, I am sorry that this is your path, but I am humbled and grateful that I was able to experience this with him. For one, I believe without family recovery, I never would have found God, a loving God. Because of recovery, I have let go of a fearing God, for the most part. Second, how am I grateful? I have seen such hard things during these last few years. I have heard many express sadness, hopelessness, despair, fear, and lost dreams. But as our good friend Deanna says, don't stop coming until the miracle happens. I have seen miracles with the family members of addicts and the loving addict themselves. You give me hope, you give me strength, and you allow me to be me. For this, I am eternally grateful and humbled. At last, I have made connections. I truly believe that the opposite of addiction is meaningful human connections. Each week, I get to connect with people who share my experience with addiction. I get to be strengthened by you. I'm working so hard on connecting because that is what we take with us through this life and the life after. We take our connections, our relationships with those we love and those who love us. So I am a believer in addiction recovery, but does it end when everything seems good again? I have 6 beautiful children. One is gay, one struggles with God as I did, one has addictions, one is navigating becoming a new father, one has special needs, and one is a girl finding her way. I practice my oh so important recovery tools with each one. With one, I practice love and acceptance. With one, I practice patience and understanding. With another one, I get to be free from shaming and judgment. One gets encouragement and support. One gets his special needs met, and one gets to be the recipient of parents who learned recovery just in time for her to find her way. As I have learned how to live happy despite the choices my children make, I know now what enabling is, and I am pretty good 50% of the time. I can find happiness even in the diverse journeys of my children. I have learned to be easy on myself and do self-care and try to navigate the bumps and bruises while finding peace with God. I share all this because after having a spiritual awakening, I also know that this was not reserved for just me, but that God loves all his children. And as it says in scripture, fear not, little children, for you are mine, and I have overcome the world, and you are of them, and of them that my Father have given me, and none of them that my Father have given me shall be lost. Please don't stop coming until the miracle happens, but realize the miracle is usually within ourselves as we grow and learn through recovery and God's love. And that is the end of my letter.
Heidi, thank you so much
Very
for
powerful.
that. I relate so much with you because that's where I was too. I love that you talked about the fear and the
Mhm.
higher power thing. I didn't understand that either until I hit my rock bottom with my two boys. And I'm so glad that you talked about that because we hear that from so many people. And at the beginning of the webinar, I held up this puzzle right here. And I talked about how frustrating it is when we miss one piece of the puzzle, get it all put together. And I really believe that you hit the nail on the head, Heidi. For me, I needed that spiritual healing and I never knew how to access that, that I love that you mentioned step 1, 2, and 3 and letting go and letting God. So thank you so much. And I think that's what the ranch, at least when my son went to the ranch, that's what I needed. I needed to have that connection, that divine connection with my higher power so that I didn't have to be the one to control or fix. And you did a beautiful job speaking from your heart in that beautiful letter. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thanks, Heidi.
Thank you. And you can see, you guys, what you get when you come to a class on Tuesday night with Chris and Heidi. Powerful, vulnerable,
how do you choose
emotional.
You're all so
Good
wonderful.
stuff,
So wonderful.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris
and Heidi, for giving your heart. Sure appreciate it. All right, our last speaker, Lane Porter. Lane will come a little bit from a clinical direction, but also personal as well. Lane is a recovering addict who struggled for years. He also now is a clinician, a mental health counselor, working with us here at the ranch. What's neat though is that Lane is our intake specialist. When we have a family member that calls that has a need to have
it's
a family
almost
member,
always the family member that calls.
that needs to get in the ranch, or if we have an addict that he speaks to, here's an individual that can't just kind of relate. He has been there. But what he also brings to the table is a clinical experience, that side of mental health. So a powerful combination. So we'll turn some time now over to Lane. Lane, you're on. Thanks, man.
Thank you, Lane.
Thanks, Rick and Christy. So as I've been listening tonight in trying to decide what I wanted to share, I've been watching Andrew Jewell make awesome comments and discuss what he's going through. I've seen some anonymous folks who have posted some questions about shame. My heart has moved to kind of to talk about some of the terms that we've used here in helping family members kind of to navigate the tricky path of getting a family member who may not be motivated to get into treatment. So I'm going to start off with some bad news, and the bad news is either way it's going to hurt. That's unfortunately just the way it is, because what ultimately is going to happen is that your family member, what ultimately could happen is that you will do everything you were supposed to do, and your family member will still remain sick. And the other thing is that, you may be confronted with some cold and harsh realities about yourself and about your situation. Sorry, let me kind of find my thoughts there. I'm going to start here. Our job as a human being is to keep ourselves healthy. It is to keep it is to take care of our side of the street, and it is to love and to connect to other people. The way that we can best love and connect to those in our family member, in our family, is through taking care of ourselves and keeping ourselves healthy. So if we have a family member, if we have issues in our life that are toxic, and by toxic, I mean poisonous, I mean damaging, I mean hurtful. Those could be things like a sick loved one. Those could be things like control issues that Eric talked amazingly about, power and control issues. I think Chris talked about that as well. If those are things like enabling issues, which a lot of the time moms and their desire to love kind of and help muddy the line between what is helping and loving and what is enabling. If those are codependency issues where my well-being is determined by the well-being of my family members, as Chris, as the myth that Chris dispelled about we can only be as happy as our happiest child. Whatever that toxicity is that is in our life, we need to take care of it, and we need to set boundaries with it. So if you are here and you have a loved one that is suffering, what these folks are asking you to do, and what we're asking you to do, is reflect on yourself. How wrapped up in this am I getting? And how can I best keep me healthy? With the hope that when I'm healthy, I too can turn and help my loved one. When I said either way it's going to hurt, here's the cold comfort. You can do everything right, and your family member can still continue with their disease. And at that point, you just need to keep working your recovery, and you need to be ready to set healthy boundaries, whatever those look like for you, and make sure that you're doing whatever you can to keep the toxicity out of the relationship. If there is toxic enabling, if there's toxic codependency, if there is toxic love, which is enabling usually, or codependency, if that relationship is enmeshed, if your desire to get an outcome from them is turning into control and power moves or shame, then we need to draw back. We need to look at ourselves. We need to get ourselves clean, and we need to set boundaries. So, I have about 4 minutes left. One thing that I encourage you newcomers to do is to redefine and readdress your definition of love, because we, in the Q&A area, and there has been a lot of warm fuzzy about what love, about love, and that love is the answer. And that's absolutely right. Love is the answer. Love does not always look like what we think it looks like. Sometimes, and this is a phrase that I've used a lot, so it may sound like a broken record to some of you, but love is sometimes telling a person that you love them too much to help them go downhill anymore. We have to be willing to only help our loved ones go up. If we are helping them continue in a destructive path, if we are giving them, money, if we're giving them a place to stay, if we're allowing them to continue downhill because of our assistance, then we have taken what is supposed to be love, and we've crossed over to enabling. And so, as hard as it may be, we've got to figure out, if your home has become a toxic place where there's an active addict, and you are enabling that by allowing that to continue, part of taking care of your side of the road is cleaning house. So we have to redefine that love. We also have to redefine help, because help very frequently, yeah, I was speaking with a lady today, and I was discussing with her that help and enabling are on a continuum, but it isn't a black and white continuum, and that's the rough part. Help is over here, and enabling is over here, and they all come from a place of love, and they're all wanting to help a family member get better. But somewhere in the middle, there's this gray area, and it is gray. There is no black and white line, unfortunately. I wish there was, where help starts to become enabling. Mom and dads, this is where we live, and there's no escaping it. Sometimes you might be enabling. You know, that's okay. We also can't take, we can't take this process too seriously. I would err on the side of helping, even if it includes some enabling, over the side of not helping to make sure that you never enable. Sometimes we're going to enable a little bit. If we are hopefully moving in an upward trajectory towards getting better and not in a downward trajectory towards becoming sicker, then it's all grist for the mill. And two, we've got to redefine things like guilt and shame. Everybody who's not new to these will understand and can speak to the difference between guilt and shame. Guilt is sending a message that you are more than what is happening, that you're more than the sum of your behaviors, that you're infinite worth, that you're infinitely valuable, that I will never give up on you, that I love you no matter what, and that I will always love you, and that there is nothing that you can do or say that can change that. That's a message you can give yourself. That's also a message you can give sick loved ones. Shame, on the other hand, labels. It says things like, because you lie, you're a liar. Because you've done bad things, you're less than. You are your behaviors. And right now you're a lying, cheating, addict, loser. It assigns labels, and it defines a person by what they have done rather than by who they are. All of us, regardless of what we have done, we are of infinite worth. We have, in the eyes of our Father in heaven, in the eyes of our parents, whoever it is, hopefully in the eyes of the mirror, when we look back at ourselves, we realize that we are more than the things that we have done, that we are of infinite worth. And we can learn to speak to ourselves through a voice that says you are worth more, that we can learn to speak to our addicts, to our loved ones, in a way that says, I love you too much to help you go downhill. You are better than what you are doing. You are more than what you are doing, but I'm going to allow you to walk your path. When you are walking it uphill, I am here. When you are heading downhill, I will be in the background waiting, because I love you, and I can't help if you're going down. So understanding how to navigate what guilt talk versus shame talk sounds like is tricky business. That's my time. I'm telling you, I'm out of time. I would love to help anybody out there. If you have an addict who is still, is still sick and out there in the game and still in pain, and you need help, my number's on the website. I can send it to you. My cell phone is available to anyone. I'm happy to help anytime, anyone, on an individual and personal basis. There is help, there is hope, there is healing. And so reach out to the folks at Renaissance Ranch. We're here for you, and keep coming back to these meetings and keep coming back to these webinars.
Thanks, Lane. Man,
Thank
that
you,
was
Lane.
powerful.
Thank you.
When you mentioned that shame assigns labels, I think back when I didn't understand that, how I would assign, if you will, labels to my boys. And we've learned that shame is the core center of all addiction. And I can just see that was causing emotional bleeding back then. And, cravings for their drug of choice always comes from emotional bleeding. And shaming on the part of what we were doing was a big part. So thanks for reminding of that and talking about enabling and just powerful information. Well, hey, a couple questions have come up. Matt, first one for you, and the rest of you wants to jump in, go ahead. But Matt, you had said that you and your wife were struggling, and that others had lesser issues that the marriage didn't last. Yours was able to last because of recovery. Can you put some color on that? Why did that happen? I mean, your story is pretty serious. You and I have had talks where you said Holly should have left. If I was her, I would have left. Why? What happened in that? And why was recovery so critical? How did that hold the marriage together? Sherry and Jeremy, you guys might want to think about and comment as well. Matt, what's your feelings?
Yeah, so again, fantastic stuff that was shared tonight. Listening to all you guys share, I keep wanting to skip my family group and join your guys' family group because I'm like, man, this is some grade A recovery material from everybody. So thank you, everybody. And it was kind of shared tonight, by everybody, really, with Eric and Sherry and Jeremy and Heidi and Chris and Deanna about the relationship. And so when Holly and I met, when I got into the ranch in 2013, we'd already been married 19 years. And I remember Chris Groves at the ranch telling us that we were going to have to learn how to have a new relationship. In fact, when I was in sober living, I remember we went out on a date and we went to see a movie and I was nervous. I'm like, man, do I put my arm around her? Do I try to hold her hand? I'm like, I've got 4 kids with this woman. I can't believe I'm nervous. I'm anxious. But this was about developing this new relationship because we'd been in the dysfunctions for, gosh, 19 years. And kind of like what Sherry and Jeremy shared was I kind of joke and say Holly and I were a match made in hell, right? So she was looking to parent, I was looking for a parent, and you always attract at your level of dysfunction. You'll never attract somebody healthier than you, so you'll kind of attract to that level. And so it was just this relationship where we were just cat and mouse relationship and dysfunction. And again, and we've talked a lot about tonight about codependency and what is involved in that. And one of the things in codependency is what's known as enmeshment, which means I don't know where I end and you begin, and we're just kind of all enmeshed in this. And it's this very parasitic relationship. And a parasitic relationship doesn't want to kill the host, but it sucks the life from it, as opposed to trying to develop this symbiotic relationship. And so as I looked at Holly and I, and Holly came from no alcoholism or addiction in her family. And I tell people alcoholism doesn't run in my family. It gallops through and breaks everything in its path. But both of us, the manifestation was the same. So it's interesting how her codependency and my codependency, it was perfect for each other. And Holly, of course, smarter and wiser than I am, was able to kind of see what her part was in the dysfunction in her family with the absence of alcohol or drugs, but still perfection, right? Be perfect, do perfect, look perfect, always present as perfect. And mine were alcoholism, and obviously shame was a big component of that. And Holly's willingness to really embrace the program and to work on herself. And that's kind of what helped me the most was she quit co-signing and enabling my behavior and began to set boundaries. And I kind of knew like how far I could push her. And that's the thing with addicts, alcoholics, they kind of know where that line is. And when you draw that line in the sand and they know you're serious, and that's typically when they finally get in to get help, and a willingness on her part and my part to do the work and then come together. And that's what kind of takes in the relationship is both parties willing to kind of, hey, what's my part in this? What's your part in this? Again, not blaming each other as we're co-participants in this system, but beginning to kind of look at what our part is and what I can bring to it. And obviously the steps, right? Steps 8 and 9, what's my side of the street? What's your side of the street? And coming together. And it was just perfect that she was willing to do it. And so was I. And that really helped and mended the relationship. A lot like what's here tonight with the couples we see online probably experience a very similar thing. So
That's neat. And you know, we've talked about, Matt, how your relationship with her is so much more richer
right.
because of, you know, working on your recoveries. Sherry, what's your input on that?
Yeah, so I'd agree with everything that Matt said. And for me, it was probably my experience being in the singles scene for so long. I knew the dating pool options were pretty bleak. And so I knew that if I divorced Jeremy, that I could potentially be single the rest of my life. And I am of the mindset that you fix what's broken and you stick with it, and you the grass isn't greener on the other side. So you need to just stay and water your own lawn. And so I feel like it was important that we work on what we had. There was enough there that it was salvageable. He didn't have like any affairs or anything like that. He knew he was loyal, that kind of thing. There wasn't anything that happened that wasn't fixable. And so we were able to work it out because I saw the change in him, and it was amazing to witness that.
If I could speak to couples who do experience sex addiction or pornography addiction, because that's probably the biggest addiction we have right now. My husband and I have had the opportunity over the last 15 years just with our church to facilitate 12-step meetings and in those circles. And I will tell you, I have not seen stronger women or stronger couples than women who work their own recovery and allow their husband the dignity of working their recovery. And even through hard things like pornography addiction, and they become very strong, as you've seen tonight. Those couples become very strong and very united and very bonded. They're able to work through those addictions, with the recovery. And sometimes it takes finding a therapist. And really quickly on boundaries, there's been a lot of mention of boundaries, and some of our newcomers might be like, what does that mean? I know that was an intimidating word for me years ago. But for me, I think of boundaries as, what do I need to be safe? What do I need in my home, in my life, in my relations to feel safe? And I make a decision on what I'm going to do under this circumstance. This is what I'm going to do, and I can do it with great love. And I know I need to follow through on that. But that's brought a lot of empowerment to me in my life as I've learned how to do that. As you keep coming to our groups, you'll learn how to do that. Basically, you don't want to hurt yourself. You don't want to allow anybody else to hurt you. And you learn how to set those boundaries, and you feel so much freer and so much more empowered. You get out of those cycles of those downward cycles that have been talked about tonight. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. Got another question, but before we leave this one, is there any other feelings from the panelists that maybe you want to add?
To maybe reiterate the question.
Okay, let's go on to maybe Jeremy, I want you to address this, and then Lane, maybe you can look at it through clinical eyes. I keep thinking, you guys, about what Jeremy said. In his 30s, he had anxiety and depression. But prior to that, in the beginning, he says, you know what? In our family, we didn't talk about feelings. We walked around it, but we never talked about serious things. If there was a serious thing, just go to work, cover it up. That's what happens. That's why they call addiction the feelings disease, because you don't want to feel. But feelings buried alive never die. A lot of times they'll come out in the form of an addiction. Well, in his 30s, life starts to get a lot more pressure. He feels like he's in a pressure cooker. There's anxiety, there's depression. This thing called alcohol relieves it. Were you, first off, Jeremy, did you even think about that there was feelings buried alive and that you needed to work through that stuff, like what you later learned in the ranch? Or was it just, man, this is short term, this is fixing the problem, I just gotta do the pills and the alcohol, this is my solution here?
It never occurred to me that I was burying feelings. In retrospect, I look back and I can see that. So that's one of the huge things about recovery, is that discovery portion of the underlying causes and conditions for the alcohol and drug use, because the alcohol and drug use are merely the symptoms. We got to treat the symptoms, but we need to get down to the actual disease. And so it never occurred to me. And I my brain told me lies. I thought, yeah, this is short term. I'll be able to stop. I know I shouldn't be doing this, but it's working for now. And it never occurred to me that I was stuffing. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't have that language, that discovery, that education, and then the application of those tools.
And so, Lane, this idea of having these feelings that never die, treatment, dealing with an individual that feels broken, that feels addicted, but doesn't know why. Working through those issues, talk a little bit about treatment and how that actually helps work through that stuff and what the process is. So a person doesn't have to numb out anymore with their drug of choice.
Sure. Well, and I'm going to take it even a step further. Jeremy said that when we talk about addiction being a symptom of something else, I'm going to go a step further and say that very frequently substance use is a solution. When we have Shelley Tulare asked about this, when we have pain, when we have chronic pain, we take a pain medication and the pain goes away. When we have anxiety, we drink a beer and the anxiety goes away. When we have depression, we do some cocaine and the depression goes away. Whatever it is, almost always the route to initial substance use is in the form of coping with something, whether it's social anxiety or crippling trauma, or impulsivity or inattention or anxiety or whatever it is. It begins as a coping, as a form of coping. It's a solution. And the problem is it as it develops into an addiction, it becomes a solution to the problems that it's created. I've lost my job because I've been using cocaine. How do I cope with this pain? I know, I'll use more cocaine. My family's about to leave me. Everybody hates me because I've been using this cocaine. How am I going to deal with this? How will I get through this? Oh, I know, I'll use more cocaine. And so this cyclical use of a substance as a solution for the problems that it created, or that it was initially to cope with, is why you hear in treatment all the time, insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. You hear that it's almost cliche in treatment circles because of that analogy that I just drew. And so first of all, we got to get rid of this thing that's become this kind of universal coping tool and a maladaptive coping tool. And then get back and treat, like Jeremy said, the underlying causes and conditions. And what we have found is that good mental health therapy, a good connection to a higher power, a connection to a family, a connection to purpose and meaning, dispelling shame and replacing it with self-love and self-care. These are all spectacular solutions to that underlying pain, that underlying anxiety, that underlying trauma, depression, whatever it is. There is a solution.
Awesome stuff. That was very, very helpful. Again, if you have comments, other panelists, before we go on to the next question, feel free to share your feelings.
All right, Rick, I'll hop on that real quick too, just to kind of validate what Jeremy and Lane were sharing. So even when me and I look back at my substance use, and I started kind of late in my life too, I wasn't a partier in high school or a drinker, but we for sure didn't deal with feelings in my family. But I remember the day going in, it was September 10th, 2001, just because I remember the next day was September 11th. But going into the doctor, and I was anxious, depressed, I couldn't sleep. And I remember spending about 3 minutes in his office. I said, I'm anxious, I'm depressed, I can't sleep. And all he did was, okay, here you go, here you go, here you go. I'm like, oh, wow, okay. So when I'm feeling these feelings, all I do is take a chemical and my feelings change. And again, that was kind of the beginning of the addiction for me. Then pretty soon, the addiction takes over. You have to take more and more and more. But it was never, why are you depressed? Why are you anxious? Why can't you sleep? Let's get into those causes and conditions rather than masking it with substance. And again, that's what all addicts do, right? It's kind of that self-medicating, that depression, that anxiety, not being able to sleep and things like that. So just kind of validating Jeremy's point as well, and Lane. So.
Thank you, Matt. And you know what, Lane, I wanted to ask you, talk about that a little bit. I think we live in a society where if we get uncomfortable, we want something fast, and we're looking to take, I can't sleep, so I'm going to take this, or I'm going to take that. I think we live in a society where we're wanting solutions quickly and we're leaning on substances. Lane, and we talked about that earlier today. You want to talk about that just a little bit, maybe a little of your experience?
Sure. Yeah. So real quickly, I want to say one thing, kind of to Jeremy's point of it was never talked about in our family, and Matt's comments at the beginning about this disease dies in the light and it thrives in isolation. That is why you'll hear so much in these groups us talk about connection, because connection is the willingness to recognize that you are enough, that you are worthy of love, and so being willing to confront what can seem like crippling vulnerability because of shame, this fear that if people see who I truly am, they'll reject me. That's what connection can, and being willing to come to these places and open up and be brave and be courageous and find out that you are worthy of love, even if you didn't see it yourself. That's where the power is, in taking those things out of that darkness that they've lived in. I mean, that Jeremy's addiction was fertilizing and growing underground before he ever touched a substance for years, in that kind of that mentality and that culture of silence and stalwart. When Chris shared the same sort of a thing, that was a wonderful petri dish that Chris had for blossoming addiction, this kind of power and control thing. So anyway, I just wanted to talk on that. When I was a kid, what Christy's talking about, when I was a kid, I was super ADHD, super hyper, and probably not a lot of fun to be around, especially for a school teacher. And so my school teachers encouraged my parents to put me on Ritalin, which they did. And the Ritalin would make me catatonic almost, especially if they gave me 2. I remember that I would take 1 if they just needed to calm me down a little, and 2 if they didn't want to hear from me, because if I took 2, I would just sit and stare. It was really, catatonia inducing, which was okay. I don't fault my parents. I know I was relatively unmanageable. What I do fault, though, was a message I received from a first grade teacher. I had forgotten to take my meds one day, and I was bouncing off the walls and talking to everybody. I was the class clown, and I was in first grade. And I remember this teacher looking at me with derision in her eyes, and she said, "You haven't taken your medication, have you, today?" And I said, "No." And she just looked at me almost with disgust and said, "I can tell." And on the mind of a little 6-year-old kid, that was powerful, because the message I learned that day is, you are not okay unless you are medicated. And believe it, I never missed my meds again, never, in first grade. And I sat there and I stared, medicated.
Wow.
And so I encourage for if there are chemical issues, if we cannot get out of bed because of crippling depression, I fully support medical science, in treating those things where they need to be. But I always encourage therapy, connection, and active participation in our recovery as a necessary component of that, and as the primary component, with the medication being supplemental, and where needed.
Yeah. Thank you, Lane.
Thank you.
Have this next question, and we've only got 2 more questions, and then we're done. So hang with us, everybody. This next question is directed to Eric and Heidi and Chris. The last question will be directed to Deanna. This question is, you can contribute to your addict's, his addiction or her addiction, enabling, shaming, trying to control, etc. But through recovery, we then learn how to contribute to their recovery. What are some ways that you have learned to contribute to your loving addict's recovery? Eric, maybe we can start with you. Oh, you're
Sorry, I
yeah, there you go.
muted.
It's interesting. I got that question because one of the things I wanted to share in my my presentation earlier I failed to, and I think it answers this question perfectly. My wife shares often in our group, one of the biggest breakthroughs for her, right? How do we support our loved ones in their recovery? I remember sitting at Renaissance Ranch in a group of addicts and family members early on in my recovery, was still wet behind the ears, just learning. And I remember a mom looking across the room at her daughter and just really grilling her about all of the times that she had relapsed. And it was not the best conversation, but I remember this massive fear in my mind, like, wait a second. We don't really talk about relapse when we're with the family members, at least we weren't at that time. But when with the addicts, there was all this talk about relapse, and it was an open conversation. I think, I remember Lane or somebody was facilitating who knew a lot more about things than I did, and they let this conversation go on relatively healthily. Well, I went home that night. My wife and I would on those nights, we would drive together, or maybe we talked by cell phone because she met earlier. But anyhow, I'm rambling. I remember like telling her with all the love in the world, hey, I'm really proud of the work you're doing. And I can see you changing, the lights back in your eyes. I feel like I'm learning a lot, but just so you know, like if you relapse, I'm out. I can't do it. And I don't remember how she reacted at the time, but what she shares is that destroyed her. Here she thought she was doing so well, and she was so proud of her intensive outpatient work. And she had confidence again, which addicts do not have confidence in themselves from their addiction. And she's like, it just drained me. And I was afraid to say anything to her. She goes, Eric, at that time, I hadn't even considered relapse. Like it hadn't even entered my mind. But when you said that, I was like, wow, he doesn't believe in me. I probably shouldn't believe in myself. Well, as I kept going to family group and I became more and more educated, somewhere along the line, something clicked and I no longer became afraid of relapse. I don't know why. I can't put my finger on it. But fast forward, and we had another conversation, and I, as simple as I did the first time, I said, hey, you know what, by the way, if you relapse, I'm good. Like we'll work through it. It's part of recovery. I'll love you. And you don't have to you don't have to hide it. Change the world. The fear was now gone again. She's like, he does believe in me. I do believe in myself. We can do this. And frankly, guys, I'm not afraid of relapse anymore. You know, knock on wood, it hasn't happened for us. It's happened for most people, but that's what you can do. Focus on yourself, learn, and know that you're going to mess up even while you're supporting your loved one. But the same way they're going to mess up, that was like a relapse of mine. That was just an ignorant thing to say. And what you learn in these classes will help your addict in their recovery. I mean, that's just one example of so many things that you can do. I want Heidi and Chris to have some time, but that's one simple example. You know, don't share all your fears with them. They've got enough of their own fears. Just work on yourself and let them know that messing up's okay and relapse is okay.
I love what you said, Eric. It's like, you know what? I know you just had cancer of the brain and, you know, they took it out and they've got radiation going. But let me tell you, if that cancer comes back, I'm out.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of similar.
That's what we know now with the
because
disease
it's
of
a
addiction
disease
of the brain.
And you know, it felt so good when you handle it the way you did the second time. That's awesome.
I'd like to hear from
Chris
Yeah.
and Heidi, your feelings?
I have to unmute first.
You'll have to unmute. There you go.
The shame thing, Chris. Let's talk about the shame.
I think what's changed and been helpful in our son and my relationship is the communication. Take my relationship with my dad and with my other siblings and stuff when he's drinking. It was like no communication. Going back to Jeremy, we did not talk about anything. I remember when he's checking in the hospital, the doctors, do you smoke? No. Do you drink? No. Come on, Dad. I mean, let's at least be honest with the medical professionals here. You're going to need a banana bag here in about, 6 hours. And we work on the honesty and that type of thing. I feel like when I work my own recovery, that it empowers me to be honest with with our loving addict and with my other children, with others, but particularly with our loving addict. We just be honest and open, and talk about hard things that normally would not have been discussed. So it's nothing's like off limits. And I can tell when I'm working his recovery hard because he's very open about it. And we happen to work together all day, every day in business. And it comes up often, and we acknowledge it and we deal with it. And I see it as a strength because I trust him more today than I ever have. Part of his thing is rigorous honesty in the course of his addiction. And I've seen that displayed by him. And it actually inspires me, where I'll cut corners to be like, no, how am I going to do that when my son's working on his thing? So I think it's just openness and honesty, and not being afraid of having the tough chat that never would have been able to have been had in my relationship with my father. And prior to getting some skills and some tools in the bag, I wasn't having that with my own kids at all. I didn't understand recoveries. I can just tell you, I can just see now in hindsight, looking back, if our son would have come out of the ranch with the skills that he had and speaking the language of recoveries, if we didn't speak recoveries by attending the family classes, we would have had zero communication. I wouldn't know what in the world he's talking about, what in the world he's trying to communicate to me. Like he had been over and been speaking Mandarin and came over, and we had not been to Mandarin classes. And he'd be like, why can't these people understand me? But because we had been to the family classes and we had learned the language from people further ahead on the path and knew what to do and hopefully not to do, and then to be able to own up and own it when we screwed up, that's developed a relationship of openness and honesty that we can actually have really good discussions. I would say, looking back on it, that's the key for our son helping me maintain my sobriety, and for us helping him is just focusing on our own recoveries and being respectful on that. Where we
and the result, look what it's done with your relationship and for your relationship with your son. I mean, powerful.
You guys have got to see the podcast. The Nilsons did our family addiction recovery podcast episode. I think it was episode 4. And Chris shares a lot about shame as well, which was so impactful for me. We learned that shame is the core center of addiction. So as family members, as we keep coming, we start to get a sense of what's helpful and what's hurtful. And we learn how to not shame, because shame is that trigger that kind of gets that emotional bleeding going where they do want to relapse, and typically the number one cause of relapse that we hear so much in our classes that we've done over the years is relationship conflicts, either with the spouse or with the parents, almost always. So thank you so much. And I think Deanna, I would like to hear.
Yeah, Heidi, did you have anything you wanted to add? Or are you good?
No, I'm probably good. The only thing I have to say is just the change in me. I love the statement, you have to feel it to heal it. And I was a non-feeling person. Rick can attest to this. I remember the first few classes, I would go and sit in the car with Chris, and I was like, what is this loving addict crap? How do they put loving and addict together in the same sentence? And I apologize to all the addicts on tonight, because today I say it so easily. I say my loving addict, and the best compliment my son ever gives me on a daily basis is, thanks for working your recovery. Thanks for working your recovery. And that's all I need. I need to know that I'll keep doing my recovery because I know it's working.
Thank you, Heidi.
I love that,
that's
Heidi.
Powerful. Okay, last question for Deanna. Deanna, you talk about working your own 12 steps. What does that mean for you? How are you working your 12 steps?
Suit up and show up every single day. We get up, we do our dailies. We look to help the person out there still suffering. We go to meetings, we get a sponsor, and we work in sister program. They say they work the program like their hair's on fire. With us, we work it like our heart's on fire. And inventory before we go to bed. And just a daily, we've only got a daily reprieve. So it's seriously wash, rinse, and repeat every day. Can't stay clean on yesterday's shower. And I'd love to talk to anybody that has any questions. any way I can help them or point them in the right way, or if you're wondering what meeting would be good for your family, I've referred people to every single person on here, all the meetings on here. They're fantastic. I hear about them all the time with the ladies I meet with. What a fantastic.
Can you tell real
job
quick what
they're
the
doing.
dailies, when you say you do your dailies, can you maybe define that for some of our newcomers, what that means?
Kind of personal, but it's that step 11, that daily conscious contact, praying only to know God's will and to have the power to carry it out. And so it's essentially for me, it's just like, when we come to the rooms, we have no power, we're blocked. And so it's how to access that power. It kind of reminds me like when you're vacuuming and maybe the plug's down behind the couch and you kind of have to feel around because you don't want to pull the whole couch out and you're kind of feeling around for that power. And we need to access into that power that's greater than us to help heal us, to bring us back to a place of sanity.
Mhm. Thank you. You guys, it's been a great meeting. Just real quick, honey, social media, Addiction Recovery Mom.
Yeah.
For those who are needing resources, tools, things that will really help them, podcasts, etc. Maybe you can mention a little bit about the Recovery Mom.
Sure. And somebody just said they'd sure like to be directed to the best group for their family. I would say, I tell everybody, check out all of our family groups, go to the one where the Spirit pulls you, where you really feel drawn to. And I think it's helpful. We try to have groups from different perspectives, because if I was a spouse, I would really like to hear how, that spouse was dealing with recovery in that marriage or in that partnership, or a parent or a grandparent. So we have classes, 6 classes a week. Some are from parent perspective, like with the Nelsons. Some are from a spouse perspective. 5 of the 6 classes are open to the community. Matt Piper does the residential group, and
which is a closed group.
We have a couples group. We're starting a new couples group that will be taught by one of our men, our alumni men, with their partner. I think that's really going to be important to bridge our alumni and start them working with their relationships. That's critical. But if you want to have more information of our resource, if you go to our social media page, Addiction Recovery Mom, Instagram or Facebook, you click on the link in the bio, it opens up to all our resources. You see all the past webinars are recorded there, the past podcasts.
Where's that
all
again?
of the classes. It's called Addiction Recovery Mom. And I just try to put out all of our resources. We highlight several of our classes. You'll be able to get a feel for who the educators are, and you'll know all the events. We put out their firesides, anything that we know is important for families, we try to get it out there. And then Lane, if you have any questions for Lane, if you have a loved one that is not in treatment yet and they're still in, needing some encouragement and some support and help, if you just go to renaissanceranch.com, there's a chat that will come up immediately with Lane, where you just one click away, you can chat with him. And he loves helping family members, and we love Lane so much. I would just like to end with a thought. I know one thing that hit me the most when my son had a relapse and went to the ranch, the piece of the puzzle that I was missing was that spiritual piece. And I have heard hundreds and hundreds of people say, I had a hole in my soul until I got to this idea with the 12 steps of a higher power. And it is so critical that everybody finds purpose and meaning in their life. And spirituality is just about that. It's about thinking hard about, what does my life mean? Why am I here? And for me, coming to the ranch and just learning the spiritual piece through working my 12 steps was that missing piece that filled the hole in my soul. And we do not shy away from the spiritual talk here at the ranch. We know that there's so much research today that indicates that spirituality causes more resiliency, more peace, more human connection, which we know is the opposite of addiction. It's not sobriety, it's meaningful human connection. And we have to have that. So I just want to share, if I could, a spiritual piece with you guys. And I just invite you to find that higher power that works for you and reframe that. If you had a really rigid God that was really scary and fearful, as you work your recovery and you do those dailies, you'll start to get a feel and a sense of truth, what is true to your core and your heart. But I love this quote where it says that the Holy Spirit satisfies and fills up every longing of the human heart and fills up every vacuum. When I am filled with that spirit, my soul is satisfied, and I can say in good earnest that the trifling things of the day do not seem to stand in my way at all. And is it not our privilege to so live that we can have this presence of the Holy Spirit constantly flowing into our souls? And that's the power, that's the key ingredient that I have heard from most people who find long-term sobriety. It is that meaningful divine connection where they feel a help and a support beyond their own. They're able to forgive things beyond their own. Addicts say, you know, I never could find long-term sobriety till I found that spiritual peace. So, you know, dive and lean into this recovery idea. It helps us heal emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, and relationally. It's so powerful. It's so true. I just encourage you to not stop coming till the miracle happens. Look into our groups. It's like listening to a podcast. You know, we have several a week. It's a click away.
Yes.
So
Thank you, honey. That was
and I
nice
just
of
want to thank our speakers. Each one of you have blessed my life tonight. That's the beauty. Every time we go to a 12-step meeting, a recovery group, you learn something new and powerful that impacts you forever. And I'm so
Yeah.
grateful for that.
I just want to second that. You guys, as participants today, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. It's wonderful to see and to feel your recovery, to see your vulnerability, and the impact that you've had in your own life with recovery and your family and with others. So thank you so much. And Lane, could we ask you to give us a closing prayer? Maybe you could unmute and close us out.
And to our listening audience, thank you so much for being here. It means so much to those that struggle with addiction that they have support, you know, and that meaningful human support. Thank you.
Our dear kind Heavenly Father, as we close this webinar, our hearts are edified by the messages we've heard and the spirit that we felt here today. And we turn to our own recovery with thee in mind and at our side, with hope and a feeling that we can move forward well with thee. Father, we're thankful for this feeling. We're thankful for the ability to gather as a group and to listen to these messages. We're thankful for the folks that have taken their time and effort to share. And Father, we ask a special blessing over those family members and those addicts who are still out there struggling, who are in need of support and connection. Please help them find their way to us or to others who can help them and provide solutions to their pain and to their isolation, to their discomfort, that they may be edified and built up as we have felt today. We ask that that will watch over us and that we can take these messages and carry them forth and do better and be better and be more like thee for having heard them, is our prayer in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Lane, thank
so
you very much. Again,
And-
everybody, thank you
And I
so
forgot
much.
to say, Lane did a podcast for us too, and that's episode 3. And episode 6 just barely came out. Did you have a question?
No, I think we're good.
Very good. Hey, thanks everybody so much. And we'll be back in another 3 months. And in between, come check out our classes.
Thanks, everyone.
guys.
Have a good
Love you
night.
guys.